"You saved me, so by sacred law I must bear you a child," said the Apache woman. Her bare feet pressed softly into the dusty ground, and the morning air smelled of dry earth and sage. She had always known these lands, every bend in the river, every ridge in the hills. But today, something felt different. A strange tension hung over the desert, as if the wind itself whispered warnings she could not quite understand. Ahuli had learned to listen to the wind, to hear the faintest hint of danger, and now her instincts told her to be alert. Ahuli was not a woman who feared easily. She had grown up among the Apache, learning to hunt, track, and survive in a world where every choice could mean life or death. Her mother had taught her the songs of the land, the rituals of respect for animals and spirits, and the deep laws that guided their people. Ahuli carried all of these lessons with her, like invisible armor, but even she could not have prepared for the events that would unfold that morning. As she moved along a narrow path near the river, a sudden shout shattered the quiet. A group of warriors not from her band had appeared over the ridge. They were strangers, armed and dangerous, their eyes cold with the promise of violence. Ahuli's heart raced, but she did not panic. She ducked behind a thick mesquite tree and pressed her back against its rough bark. The strangers were searching, calling out names in harsh voices. She recognized one as her brother's friend from another village, and a pang of fear struck her heart. These were raiders, and they were here for blood. Ahuli knew she had only one chance. If they discovered her, she might not survive. She remembered the hidden path her father had shown her as a child, a narrow trail that twisted through the rocks and led to the riverbank. She waited until the raiders passed, then darted from her hiding place, her body low, her movements quick and silent. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum, but she did not stumble. The land was familiar, and every stone and tree guided her steps. Just as she reached the edge of the river, a sharp cry cut through the air. One of the raiders had noticed something. Ahuli froze, her breath catching in her throat. She considered her options: fight, run, or hide. Her hands, though small, were steady as she clutched her knife, a gift from her mother. But before she could make a move, a voice rang out, clear and strong. "Stop! Leave her alone!" Ahuli's eyes widened. From the shadows of the trees stepped a man she had never seen before. He was tall and broad, wearing clothing that marked him as an outsider. Yet in his eyes she saw determination, courage, and something else, something she could not name. The raiders hesitated, exchanging confused glances. The man, Samuel, moved quickly. He raised his own weapon, a rifle, and shouted again. "Back away, she is under my protection." Ahuli felt a rush of hope. This stranger was risking his life for her. She did not know his name or why he had appeared, but in that moment she felt an unexpected sense of safety. Samuel's presence gave her the strength to act. Together, they managed to drive the raiders back, forcing them to retreat into the hills. Dust rose around them, mingling with the cries of anger from the defeated attackers. When the last raider disappeared, Ahuli sank to the ground, her body trembling from the adrenaline and fear. Samuel approached cautiously, lowering his weapon. His eyes softened when he saw her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle. I think I am okay," she replied, her voice shaky. She studied him carefully. There was honesty in his expression, a kind of courage that did not boast or brag. He had saved her life, and she could feel the weight of that act in a way that went beyond words. Ahuli's thoughts turned to her people, to the sacred laws that guided them. Among the Apache, when someone saved your life, a bond was created that could not be ignored. There was a law, unspoken but deeply respected, that demanded gratitude be honored in the most profound way. She had been taught this since she was a child. Life given in protection must be repaid with respect and duty. And now, standing before Samuel, Ahuli knew she faced a choice that would shape her future. "You saved me," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "And in my people's law that means something important. Samuel frowned slightly, sensing the weight behind her words. "I don't know your law," he admitted, "but I'm glad you're safe." Ahuli nodded. She knew he could not understand the full meaning of what she had just said. "By sacred law, I must bear you a child," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. The words hung in the air, heavy with tradition and expectation. Samuel blinked, taken aback. The world he knew did not prepare him for the customs of the Apache. He had grown up with rules of his own, shaped by towns, courts, and personal freedom. And yet, in the intensity of that moment, he realized that he was standing in a place where different laws applied. Laws older than any town or town council. Laws written in the hearts of people who had survived in this land for generations. Ahuli's eyes softened, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She had survived because of this man, and now the law demanded a bond that was not easily broken. She did not yet know how this would unfold or how Samuel would respond, but she felt certain of one thing: life had changed in a single heartbeat. The river flowed quietly beside them, carrying away the dust and heat of the morning. Birds called from the trees, and the wind whispered across the hills. In that silence, Ahuli felt the weight of tradition, the gravity of gratitude, and the stirrings of an unfamiliar connection. Samuel did not yet speak, but his presence, steady and unwavering, offered a strange comfort. She realized that this moment, though terrifying and confusing, would become a turning point in her life. Hours passed, though neither spoke much. Samuel helped her find food and water, and she marveled at his gentle care, despite the violence of the morning. They shared a quiet understanding that words could not fully express. Ahuli had been trained to survive alone, but now she felt the beginnings of a bond that could not be ignored. The world was unpredictable, filled with danger and hardship, but in that quiet space beside the river, she felt the first glimmers of hope. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the land, Ahuli knew that her journey had only begun. The sacred law of her people was clear, and the path ahead would demand courage, wisdom, and a willingness to face the unknown. Yet for the first time, she also realized that life could hold unexpected allies, and that sometimes a stranger's bravery could change the course of destiny. In that quiet morning, amidst the rugged hills and flowing river, Ahuli and Samuel remained side by side. She did not yet know what the future would bring, or how their lives would intertwine. But she knew one undeniable truth: he had saved her, and for that the law demanded her respect, her loyalty, and a promise that would shape both of their lives forever. The morning had passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the rocky hills and the flowing river. Ahuli and Samuel had moved to a small clearing where the tall grass bent gently in the breeze. They needed a moment to rest after the chaos of the raid. Ahuli's body still trembled slightly, though the immediate danger had passed. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity as she watched Samuel unpack a small bundle he carried with him. Samuel had been traveling through the region for weeks. He explained, exploring the lands, learning about the people, and occasionally trading with small villages along the way. He spoke slowly, carefully choosing his words, as if aware that the world Ahuli knew was different from his own. Ahuli listened with attention, noticing how he observed the land with respect, as if he were trying to understand it rather than conquer it. "I've never seen anyone move like you," Samuel said after a pause. "You're strong, fast, smart. I don't think anyone could have escaped that raid the way you did except you." Ahuli felt a small warmth in her chest at his words. Compliments were rare, and she had been trained to value skill over praise. "I had no choice," she replied simply, her voice calm but firm. "If I had been caught, it would have been the end." She paused, considering whether to say more. "You saved me. That changes things." Samuel nodded, a serious expression crossing his face. "I know, And I didn't do it for any law or duty. I did it because it was right. You were in danger and I couldn't stand by." Ahuli looked at him carefully. His words were honest, but they did not erase the weight of her own people's law. In the Apache tradition, life was sacred, and saving a life created a bond that went beyond friendship or gratitude. It was a promise, unspoken but binding. Ahuli felt the gravity of it pressing on her mind like a stone. The two of them walked together toward the riverbank, where the water was clear and cool. Ahuli knelt to wash her hands, feeling the refreshing flow slide over her skin. Samuel followed, dipping his hands into the water and watching her quietly. For a long moment they said nothing, each lost in their thoughts. Ahuli knew she needed to explain more about her people's law, though it was difficult. The customs of the Apache were ancient, deeply rooted, and often misunderstood by outsiders. Yet she could not ignore the truth. Her life and Samuel's were now connected by a bond he might not fully understand. "In my people's law," she began carefully, "when someone saves your life, it is not just an act of kindness. It is a sacred promise. That promise, it must be honored. There are ways to honor it and ways to break it. To break it is to dishonor not only yourself but your family and your ancestors." Samuel listened, his brows furrowed, trying to comprehend the weight of her words. "I see, but I don't know if I can follow a law I've never learned," he admitted. "Back where I come from, people decide their own promises. We don't have rules written in the land or the river." Ahuli shook her head gently. "It is not just rules. It is life itself. It is the balance of the world, the respect for life and the ones who give it. You have given me life again. That is why I must honor you." The air between them was thick with thought and emotion. Samuel wanted to speak, to offer comfort or question the law, but he realized that in this moment, words could not capture the depth of what Ahuli felt. He respected her courage and wisdom, even if he could not fully understand her customs. The sun moved higher, and the heat pressed down on the land. Ahuli suggested they build a small shelter near the riverbank for shade. Samuel agreed, and together they gathered branches, rocks, and long grasses. As they worked side by side, an unspoken rhythm developed between them. Ahuli observed Samuel's movements, noting his careful handling of each branch and his attention to the materials. He was not reckless, and he respected the land as if it had life of its own. When the shelter was finished, they sat beneath it, leaning against the warm stones and listening to the gentle sound of the river. Ahuli finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. The raid, the fear, and the rescue, all of it had changed her life in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. And Samuel, he had become a part of her story, whether she liked it or not. "Tell me more about your people," Samuel said, breaking the silence. "I want to understand. I want to know why your law is so important." Ahuli smiled faintly. "It is not easy to explain," she admitted. "The Apache live with the land, the wind, the sun, and the spirits. Everything has meaning and everything is connected. When someone saves your life, it is not a debt in money or goods. It is a bond in spirit and honor. It is a promise that affects not just you and me, but the world we live in." Samuel nodded slowly. "It makes sense in a way I can feel, even if I don't fully understand." Ahuli's eyes softened. "It is hard for outsiders to understand, yes, but that does not make it less real. Life is fragile and respect must be earned and returned." As the afternoon passed, they shared small stories about their pasts. Ahuli spoke of her childhood, hunting with her father, learning the songs and dances of her people, and the lessons her mother had taught her. Samuel shared stories of his travels, the towns he had visited, the people he had met, and the dangers he had faced alone. Their stories were different, yet they found common ground in survival, courage, and respect for life. Suddenly, the sound of distant hooves reached their ears. Ahuli tensed, instinctively reaching for her knife. Samuel stood beside her, alert. A group of travelers appeared, not hostile but curious. They were traders passing through the territory. Ahuli relaxed slightly but remained cautious. Samuel approached them with a calm voice, explaining their situation without revealing too much. The traders nodded and continued on, leaving the pair in peace once again. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long orange and red shadows over the hills, Ahuli and Samuel sat by the river, watching the water shimmer. Ahuli felt the weight of her promise pressing on her heart. She knew that the law she followed was not easy for Samuel to understand, yet she also knew that she could not ignore it. Her gratitude for his bravery and the bond it created was too deep, too sacred. Samuel glanced at her and saw the seriousness in her eyes. "Ahuli," he said quietly, "I don't fully understand everything you've told me, but I want to try. I want to respect your world, even if it is very different from mine." Ahuli nodded, feeling a sense of relief and hope. His words did not solve the future, nor did they lessen the weight of the law, but they showed respect, which was a beginning. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a path forward, a way that honored both tradition and choice. Night fell and the stars appeared, bright and endless above the desert. The river reflected their light, and the air cooled with the coming evening. Ahuli and Samuel shared a small meal by the fire, their conversation light yet meaningful. They laughed quietly at stories of clumsy hunts, mistaken paths, and childhood adventures. For a brief moment, the fear and danger of the day seemed far away. As sleep approached, Ahuli lay on a bed of soft grass, listening to the gentle murmur of the river. She reflected on the day's events, the raid, the rescue, the bond that now connected her to Samuel. The law of her people was clear, and her duty was clear. Yet for the first time, she felt a spark of curiosity about what might happen if she chose to honor it in a way that respected both tradition and the stranger who had saved her. Samuel sat nearby, staring into the fire. He thought about the strange, unbreakable law Ahuli had spoken of, and the courage it took to live by it. He knew that the days ahead would test them both in ways they could not yet imagine. Yet he also felt a quiet admiration for Ahuli, a woman who was brave, wise, and unwavering in her values. The night stretched on, filled with the sounds of the desert, the whispering wind, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of an owl. Ahuli felt a sense of peace, even as questions lingered in her mind. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew that Samuel's presence had changed her life forever. In saving her, he had created a bond that neither of them could ignore. And so, under the vast, starry sky, they rested, two souls connected by fate, by courage, and by a law older than either of them could fully understand. The river flowed quietly, carrying the memory of the day and the promise of what might come. The bond was formed, and life, as unpredictable as it always had been, would now take them both on a path neither could have foreseen. The days that followed passed in a strange mixture of routine and tension. Ahuli and Samuel stayed near the river, moving carefully through the hills to avoid other bands of raiders. They hunted together, foraged for food, and learned from each other. Samuel observed Ahuli's skills with amazement, how she could track an animal by the slightest imprint, how she could find water hidden beneath the rocks, and how she moved silently through the land as if the wind itself guided her. Ahuli, in turn, noticed Samuel's resourcefulness and calm under pressure. Despite being a stranger to these lands, he adapted quickly, his mind sharp and observant. Yet beneath the calm, both of them felt a growing tension. Ahuli's thoughts often returned to the sacred law she had spoken of, the one that bound her to Samuel in a promise neither of them fully understood. She felt the weight of her people's traditions pressing on her chest, heavy and inescapable. And Samuel, though he admired and respected her deeply, struggled with the idea of a bond he had not chosen for himself. He did not reject Ahuli or her culture, but he feared the consequences of obligations he could not control. One afternoon, as they rested near a cluster of sandstone cliffs, a sound in the distance made Ahuli freeze. Her hand went instinctively to her knife, and Samuel's eyes scanned the horizon. There was no doubt horses were approaching fast. Ahuli's heart sank. Raiders again. But this time there were more of them, riding hard and shouting as they came closer. Samuel stood immediately, his rifle ready. "We have to move," he shouted. "Follow me." Ahuli nodded, her mind racing. She knew these hills well, but she also knew that the raiders were faster in numbers and ruthlessness. They could not outrun them forever. Together, they sprinted along a hidden path that twisted through the cliffs, rocks crunching beneath their feet. Samuel's breathing was steady, but Ahuli could feel his tension as clearly as her own. They reached a narrow ledge overlooking a deep canyon. Ahuli stopped and looked at Samuel. "We can hold them here," she whispered. "They cannot pass without coming close. I know this land. They will have to fight us if they want to continue." Samuel nodded, understanding immediately. He positioned himself beside her, raising his rifle, while Ahuli crouched low with her knife ready. The raiders came closer, shouting insults and threats, unaware of the trap awaiting them. When the first horse reached the ledge, Samuel fired a warning shot. The sound echoed through the canyon, startling the raiders and causing a few horses to shy away. Ahuli leapt forward with her knife, moving with precision and strength, blocking any who tried to climb the ledge. The raiders faltered, unprepared for the coordination between the two of them. Yet even in victory, danger pressed close. One of the raiders managed to swing a long club at Samuel, who barely dodged it. The man lost his balance and fell back, but more were coming. Ahuli realized that they could not hold the position forever. She whispered urgently, "We have to retreat, follow the stream down the canyon. It leads to a hidden cave. I know it well." They moved quickly, splashing through the shallow water as the raiders pursued them. The canyon walls rose high on either side, echoing their steps and the shouts of the attackers. Ahuli's knowledge of the land gave them an advantage. She knew where the rocks jutted out, where the river deepened, and where roots and vines could be used for cover. By nightfall they reached the cave, a hidden hollow behind a small waterfall. They entered silently, dripping wet and exhausted. Samuel sank to the ground, breathing heavily, while Ahuli stood at the entrance listening. The raiders had lost their trail, at least for now. The sound of rushing water and the shadows of the night hid them from view. Inside the cave, Samuel finally spoke, his voice low and tinged with awe. "Ahuli, you saved us again. I don't know how you knew where to go, but He stopped, his chest heaving. Ahuli turned to him, her face serious. "I know these lands," she said simply, "but this is more than that. Life is precious. When someone saves you, it is not just the moment that matters. It is every moment after, the choices, the risks, the respect for each other." Samuel looked at her, realizing the depth of her words. He had always believed that courage was about facing danger alone, but Ahuli showed him that courage was also about connection, trust, and understanding. She had taught him a lesson he had never expected to learn, that saving a life was not a simple act. It was a bond that could change everything. As the night deepened, they made a small fire in the cave, careful to keep it low so the smoke did not reveal their location. Samuel cleaned his rifle, while Ahuli prepared a simple meal from dried meat and berries. They spoke quietly, sharing thoughts and fears they had never expressed before. "Ahuli," Samuel said, breaking the silence, "I need to be honest. I don't fully understand your law or what it asks of me, but I do know this: I will not abandon you. I may not know the future, but I know that I respect you, and I want to stand by you through what comes next." Ahuli felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. His words did not remove the obligation the law demanded, but they showed care, choice, and respect. She realized that the sacred bond she had spoken of was not just about duty, it was also about trust. She could not force Samuel to obey her law, but she could rely on his honor, his courage, and his willingness to be present. The next morning, they emerged from the cave cautiously. The raiders had not returned, but the world beyond the canyon was still dangerous. Ahuli knew that they could not remain in one place for long. She and Samuel traveled through the hills, moving carefully and avoiding paths that might be watched. Along the way, Ahuli began to teach Samuel more about her people's customs, the songs, the stories, and the traditions that guided their lives. Samuel listened intently, asking questions, learning not just for survival but out of genuine curiosity and respect. Ahuli could see his mind working, piecing together a world so different from the one he had known. He asked about the sacred law, about how it shaped her life, and about the ways her people honored life itself. Ahuli answered honestly, carefully, without judgment. She realized that teaching him was another form of protection. If he understood, he could navigate the dangers ahead with wisdom rather than force. Days passed, and the bond between them deepened. They faced minor challenges, crossing treacherous streams, avoiding wild animals, and finding enough food to sustain themselves. Each challenge strengthened their trust in each other. Samuel admired Ahuli's skill, and she began to see the depth of his character, his intelligence, patience, and unwavering sense of fairness. Yet the turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, they were confronted by a small group of Apache scouts from Ahuli's own band. At first, there was tension. Ahuli feared they might see Samuel as a threat, and Samuel feared he would be rejected for being an outsider. But the scouts quickly recognized Ahuli and the story of her rescue. They had come to ensure she was safe and to understand the situation fully. Ahuli explained everything: the raid, Samuel's bravery, and the sacred law. The scouts listened with respect, nodding at her words. They understood the bond that had formed, though they knew it would be complicated for an outsider. Samuel watched silently, realizing that the law was not just tradition. It was a living guide that connected life, honor, and trust. One scout, an elder named Tay, spoke finally. "You have acted with courage and honor, Samuel," he said. "The law binds you in spirit, but it also binds you in understanding. Respect her, and you respect the life she saved. This is the beginning of a path, not the end." Samuel nodded, feeling the weight and responsibility of her words. He realized that this moment marked a turning point, not just in their journey, but in how he understood honor, life, and duty. He could not deny the sacred law, nor could he fully command it, but he could respect it and live by it with integrity. Ahuli felt a mix of relief and determination. The law was clear, but so was her choice. She could honor it while respecting Samuel's freedom. This balance, she realized, was the true meaning of the sacred promise. She looked at Samuel, and for the first time she felt that the future, though uncertain, was something they could face together. That night, they camped with the scouts nearby. Ahuli and Samuel sat by the fire, watching the flames dance against the darkening sky. The events of the past days, the raid, the chase, the cave, and now the meeting with the scouts, had tested them in ways they had never imagined. Yet through it all, they had learned something essential. Courage was not just about strength, but about connection, trust, and respect. As the stars appeared, Ahuli realized that life had changed forever. Samuel had become part of her story, and she a part of his. The sacred law had created a bond, and the bond had created understanding. And though challenges still awaited them, they were no longer alone. The days following their meeting with the scouts were filled with quiet tension. Ahuli and Samuel traveled alongside the scouts for a while, moving cautiously through the hills. The desert was vast, and danger could appear at any moment, but the greatest challenge was no longer the land or the raiders. It was the weight of their own thoughts and emotions. Each step brought them closer to understanding the sacred law, Yet it also brought the realization that honoring it was not simple. Ahuli often found herself staring at the horizon, her mind tangled with questions. She had always known the law, had always followed it without hesitation. But now it demanded more than duty. It demanded honesty, courage, and the willingness to face unknown consequences. Samuel had saved her life, and the law bound her to him in a promise that could not easily be broken. She respected him, she trusted him, but she also knew he had his own path to choose. The thought of forcing him to follow the law made her uneasy. Could a promise born from duty truly last if it was not freely honored? Samuel noticed her quiet moments, her faraway gazes, and the way her hands would tighten around her knife when she thought no one was watching. One evening, as they rested by a river under the shade of cottonwood trees, he asked gently, "Ahuli, are you all right? You've been quiet." She looked at him, hesitating. The words she wanted to speak were heavy with meaning, and yet she could not avoid them. "I am thinking," she admitted, her voice soft. "Thinking about the law, about what it asks of us and what it asks of you." Samuel listened carefully. "I've been thinking too," he said. "I want to honor your traditions, Ahuli. I want to respect the bond that has formed. But I also want to be honest about who I am and what I can do. I cannot follow a law I do not fully understand, but I can stand beside you as we figure this out." Ahuli nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and uncertainty. His words showed respect, but the path ahead remained unclear. The law was not a suggestion, it was sacred. Yet Samuel's willingness to engage, to try to understand, was more than she had expected. It was a beginning, and beginnings were fragile but full of hope. The next challenge came unexpectedly. While crossing a narrow canyon, they encountered signs of another group of raiders, fresh tracks in the sand and the distant echo of voices. Ahuli's heart tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. They could not flee forever. Samuel and the scouts prepared carefully, setting up a defensive position on a rocky outcrop. Ahuli observed each move, ensuring every step was precise. The raiders appeared as the sun began to dip low, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. The encounter was brief but tense. The raiders, fewer in number than expected, attempted to intimidate them with shouts and gestures. Ahuli stepped forward, her voice firm. "We do not wish to fight you, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Leave and you will not be harmed." The leader of the raiders laughed, but something in Ahuli's stance, in the way Samuel stood beside her, made him hesitate. He sensed that these two were not ordinary travelers, but people bound by courage and purpose. Slowly, reluctantly, the raiders retreated, disappearing into the canyon shadows. After the encounter, the group settled by the river, and Ahuli finally allowed herself to speak about her fears. "Each time we survive, each time we escape danger, the law becomes heavier," she said quietly. "It is not just about what has happened. It is about what may come. Samuel, I do not want this promise to harm you or to take away your freedom, but the law, it is not mine to change." Samuel reached out, placing a hand on hers. "Ahuli, I understand," he said. "I know the law is important, and I want to respect it, but I also know that life is more than duty. It is also about choice, about trust, and about the courage to face what is difficult together. I will not abandon you. I may not fully understand everything yet, but I will be here." Ahuli felt a deep sense of gratitude, but also a new weight. The law was sacred, but the future was uncertain. She realized that honoring it would require careful balance, respect for tradition, respect for Samuel, and the courage to navigate a path that had no clear direction. That night, as they camped beneath the stars, Ahuli reflected on the journey so far. The raids, the rescues, the long hours of walking and hiding, and now the growing bond with Samuel, all of it had shaped her in ways she could not have imagined. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and yet she had survived. And in surviving, she had found a connection that was rare and powerful. Samuel sat across from her, tending the small fire. The glow illuminated his face, showing the fatigue but also the resolve that had carried him through the challenges of the past days. He looked at Ahuli with quiet admiration. "You are remarkable," he said softly. "The way you move, the way you think, the way you honor your people, it is inspiring." Ahuli smiled faintly, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I have always tried to live as my people taught me," she replied. "But you have shown me that courage is not just about strength. It is also about respect, honesty, and understanding. You have risked yourself to save me, and that changes everything." The next morning brought new challenges. They needed to cross a wide, dry valley, exposed and vulnerable. Ahuli studied the land carefully, calculating the safest route. Samuel followed her instructions, trusting her knowledge and experience. As they moved, she noticed how his respect for the land and its dangers had grown. He no longer acted as a stranger in a foreign world. He was learning, adapting, and becoming part of it. Despite the careful planning, a sudden sandstorm arose, sweeping across the valley with fierce wind and blinding dust. Ahuli grabbed Samuel's arm, guiding him to shelter behind a large rock formation. They crouched low, shielding themselves from the swirling sand. The storm raged for what felt like hours, testing their patience, endurance, and courage. When the storm finally passed, they emerged, exhausted but alive. Ahuli took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her body ease slightly. "Life is unpredictable," she said quietly. "And yet the law, it is always there, guiding us, reminding us of what matters." Samuel nodded, brushing sand from his clothes. "And we are learning to follow it together," he said. "Not because we have no choice, but because we respect it, and because we respect each other." Ahuli felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The law bound them, but it was the trust, the courage, and the shared experiences that gave it meaning. She realized that surviving danger was only one part of the journey. The other part was navigating the complexities of human connection, loyalty, and honor. Days later, they reached a small village on the edge of Apache territory. Ahuli recognized some of the elders who greeted her with cautious respect. She explained her journey, the raid, and Samuel's bravery. The elders listened carefully, nodding at her words. Samuel stood quietly, allowing Ahuli to speak for both of them. One elder, a woman named Naeli, spoke finally. "Ahuli, you have honored your people and the law, and Samuel, you have shown courage, respect, and integrity. The bond you share is unusual, but it is rooted in understanding and trust. This is the way to honor both life and law." Ahuli felt a sense of peace, yet she knew the path ahead remained uncertain. The law required action, respect, and courage, and the future would demand more from both her and Samuel. But in that moment, she allowed herself a small sense of hope. They had survived, they had learned, and they had grown closer in ways that went beyond duty or obligation. That night, as they prepared to rest in the village, Ahuli reflected on the lessons of the past days. The raids, the storms, the moments of fear, and the acts of bravery had all shaped her understanding of the world and the law. She realized that true honor was not just about following tradition. It was about balancing respect for duty with respect for choice, courage, and compassion. Samuel sat beside her, sharing a quiet meal of bread and dried fruit. They spoke softly about the challenges ahead, the responsibilities they would face, and the bond that had been created between them. Ahuli knew that the sacred law would continue to guide her, but now she understood that it was also shaped by trust, understanding, and the courage to face life together. As the stars appeared overhead, Ahuli felt a mixture of hope and resolve. The law was clear, the bond was sacred, and the future was uncertain. Yet she knew that, with Samuel by her side, they could face whatever came next. And in that knowledge, she found strength, courage, and the quiet assurance that the sacred promise could be honored without losing the freedom to choose. The following weeks were a delicate balance of preparation and reflection. Ahuli and Samuel had settled temporarily in the small village at the edge of Apache territory. The elders had welcomed them with cautious respect, recognizing both her bravery and his integrity. Life here was simpler than the wild hills and canyons they had crossed, yet it brought its own challenges. Learning the village routines, understanding the expectations of the elders, and navigating the complexities of their bond under the sacred law. Ahuli spent her days teaching Samuel more about her people's traditions. She showed him how to track animals, identify edible plants, and read the subtle signs of the desert. Samuel listened carefully, absorbing every detail, never questioning her methods, and showing humility that impressed the elders. Ahuli realized that respect was the foundation of any bond, not only between people, but between people and the land they lived in. One afternoon, as they sat by the river that ran through the village, Samuel turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Ahuli, I've been thinking," he said, "about the law, about us, and about the future. I realize now that honoring it isn't just about me agreeing or following rules I don't fully understand. It's about trust, courage, and respect, and I want to honor it in every way I can." Ahuli felt a quiet warmth at his words. His understanding had grown deeper than she had expected. It was one thing to act bravely in a moment of danger, but it was another to embrace the meaning of a sacred promise, to recognize its weight and honor it willingly. She nodded slowly. "Samuel, your heart and your respect matter more than you know. The law is not only about obligation. It is about understanding life, the value of courage, and the respect owed to those who save us." Their days passed in a routine that allowed them to learn more about each other. They hunted together, prepared food, and spoke long into the evenings about dreams, fears, and hopes. Ahuli began to see Samuel not just as the man who had saved her life, but as a companion who shared her understanding of honor and duty. Samuel, in turn, grew to admire her strength, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to her people. But the true test of their bond came unexpectedly. One morning, a messenger arrived from a distant Apache village. He carried news of a neighboring band that had attacked traders and travelers, creating fear that raiders might soon move closer to their area. The elders called a council, and Ahuli and Samuel attended, knowing that their knowledge of the terrain and their experience with raiders could be valuable. The council was tense. Leaders debated how to protect the villages, manage resources, and prepare for potential conflict. Ahuli listened carefully, weighing every word, every suggestion. She understood that leadership required more than bravery. It required wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond immediate fear. Samuel, standing beside her, realized how deeply her people thought about each action, how honor and survival were intertwined in every decision. After hours of discussion, a plan was made. Scouts would monitor the surrounding areas, villagers would be trained in basic defense, and messages would be sent to other bands to maintain communication. Ahuli volunteered to guide a group through the hills, knowing she could navigate safely and avoid unnecessary danger. Samuel insisted on accompanying her, despite the risks. The elders, after seeing his dedication, allowed him to join, acknowledging that his courage and respect made him a trustworthy companion. As they moved through the hills, Ahuli reflected on how far they had come. The man who had once been a stranger was now her partner in survival, her equal in courage and understanding. Yet she also recognized that the sacred law still bound them, and that honoring it required continued respect and thoughtfulness. She could not ignore the promise, but she also did not want to impose it upon Samuel. The balance was delicate, yet she felt a growing confidence in their shared path. The journey through the hills was challenging. The terrain was steep, and the sun beat down upon them with relentless heat. They encountered small signs of danger, broken branches, distant footprints, and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Each time they moved cautiously, relying on each other's skills and instincts. Samuel marveled at Ahulai's knowledge, the way she could read the land as if it were a living storybook. He began to understand that her strength was not only in her physical skill, but in her ability to observe, think, and make decisions that balanced safety with efficiency. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and red, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. Ahulai paused, taking in the view, and Samuel followed her gaze. The valley stretched far, dotted with small villages and patches of farmland. It was beautiful, yet it also reminded them of the fragility of life and the constant need for vigilance. "We have to be careful," Ahulai said softly. "The land is wide, but danger can appear anywhere. Our people rely on the bond we share, on trust, courage, and respect. We must honor it not just for ourselves, but for everyone depending on us." Samuel nodded. "I understand, Ahulai. I want to honor it, not because I am forced, but because I respect you, the law, and what it represents. I will stand with you, whatever comes." Ahulai felt a deep sense of relief and connection. The sacred law was not a chain, it was a guide, a reminder of the responsibility and trust that shaped human relationships. And in Samuel's words, she recognized a commitment that matched her own. The next days were spent assisting the villages, teaching defensive strategies, and ensuring that travelers were safe from potential raiders. Samuel and Ahulai worked tirelessly, often side by side, learning from each other and growing stronger as a team. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced their bond and their shared understanding of courage and duty. One evening, after a long day of preparation and guidance, they returned to the village. The elders had gathered to hear reports and offer praise for their efforts. Ahulai spoke humbly, acknowledging the contributions of Samuel and the scouts. Samuel, in turn, spoke of Ahulai's wisdom, skill, and unwavering commitment to her people. The elders nodded, impressed by the balance of respect, courage, and understanding displayed by both. That night, under the endless sky of stars, Ahulai and Samuel sat quietly by the river. The air was cool, and the gentle sound of flowing water created a sense of peace. Ahulai spoke softly, her thoughts full of reflection. "We have faced danger, survived challenges, and learned from each other. The law is still important, but I now understand that honoring it is also about choice, trust, and respect. It is about understanding life and each other." Samuel reached out, taking her hand in his. "Ahulai, I feel the same. The bond created by your law is sacred, and I will honor it with everything I can. But more than that, I honor you, your courage, and the life we share now." Ahulai smiled faintly, feeling a sense of calm and hope she had not known before. The journey had been difficult, filled with fear, danger, and uncertainty. Yet through it all, they had learned to rely on each other, to respect one another's traditions, and to face life with courage and honesty. The sacred law had guided them, but it was the bond, the shared understanding, and the choices they made together that had truly defined their path. As the stars shone brightly above, Ahulai reflected on the life that had brought her here. The day she had been rescued by Samuel had changed everything. The bond created by that moment, shaped by courage, respect, and sacred tradition, had grown into something meaningful and enduring. She realized that honor was not just about following rules. It was about understanding, empathy, and the willingness to face life together with trust and courage. Samuel looked at her, his expression soft and thoughtful. "Ahulai, whatever comes next, we will face it together. The bond between us is not just law, it is understanding, respect, and trust. That is stronger than fear, stronger than danger, and stronger than anything else we may face." Ahulai nodded, feeling the truth of his words in her heart. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges, dangers, and difficult choices ahead. But for the first time, she felt confident that together, they could honor the sacred law, respect each other's freedom, and face whatever life had in store. As they lay down to rest, the river flowing gently nearby, Achulai and Samuel felt a sense of peace. They had survived danger, navigated the complexities of tradition and law, and forged a bond stronger than fear. The world was still wide and unpredictable, yet they were no longer alone. Their journey had taught them courage, respect, and the true meaning of honor, not just in law, but in life and in each other. And so, under the endless sky, the two rested, knowing that the sacred promise had been honored, not through force or obligation, but through trust, understanding, and the shared courage to face life together. The river carried their reflections forward, and the stars watched over them, witness to a bond that would endure, guide, and inspire in the days to come.